The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition.
Madam Speaker, the Auditor General's October 2017 report into the government's performance in climate change from a year ago was scathing about the NDP's failure to set goals, timelines, or take any meaningful action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It also noted that this Conservative government had no plan either, despite having promised it a year and a half earlier. In 2015, the report read, the NDP had a lot of, quote, high-level strategies lacking details and estimates of their expected emissions reductions and costs, end quote. Exactly the same could be said of this government's green plan because the ideas are exactly the same. Efficiency Manitoba, organics diversion, electric buses, cap and trade for large emitters, the list goes on. Did this government pay a pretty penny to an Ottawa consultant to doll up the NDP's plan with some pillars and keystones?
Why did you block the committee?
The Honourable First Minister.
I'm sorry, Madam Speaker. I appreciated the earlier part of the preamble more than the second part, just because I frankly didn't hear the second part except for some reference to paying a consultant, which, Madam Speaker, I understand was the occupation of the member previously, part-time, and so I don't know why he's decrying the work of consultants. I don't understand. But what I do understand is this, Madam Speaker. We have a wonderful idea of how to advance the cause of making Manitoba cleaner and greener without a carbon tax. We're going to proceed to do that in spite of the fact that the federal government, and it appears the members opposite, want to raid Manitoba's pocketbooks rather than fight climate change. So rather than be divided, as the federal government is doing with Canadians right now, I think we should unify around the cause of fighting climate change. That's exactly what this government's dedicated to doing.
Here, here. The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition.
Madam Speaker, this government's greatest environmental accomplishment to date appears to be recycling old reports from the NDP, first on healthcare and now on the environment. But the so-called climate plan is not a plan, it's a wish list. It uses the term could 49 times. It says the government is considering 10 times. And on page 50, a giant asterisk, because not one action, not one pillar, and not one indicator is defined. If ifs and buts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a very nice Christmas, Madam Speaker. When is this government going to provide details for their plan and how they'll pay for it?
That to someone, or you gotta take...
Order. Order. The Honourable First Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, speaking of Christmas, the federal Liberal Party has decided they're going to have a two-tier carbon plan. And they've decided that Manitoba's flat and low and level carbon levy is inappropriate and they won't accept it. Instead, for Manitoba, it's time to stick their hands into the pockets of Manitobans and take money out. However, for Quebec, they can have a 40% lower carbon levy, and that's cool with Ottawa. And for Newfoundland, they're going to exempt them on a whole list of things that they're not exempting us or Saskatchewan or Ontario on. This is two-tier political, partisan approach to dealing with an issue we should be unified on, Madam Speaker. This shouldn't be about a tax grab from Ottawa that's preferentially heavier on every jurisdiction west of the Ottawa River and lower on every jurisdiction east of it.
Here, here. The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition on a final supplementary.
Madam Speaker, in suddenly opposing a price on pollution, the Premier joined such NDP visionaries as Roy Romano, the BC NDP, Jack Layton, and NDP MP Daniel Blakey, all of whom were happy to side with Conservatives against Liberals and against the planet if they saw a chance for political gain. The Premier tells a fine tale about cooperation one minute and threatens to sue the federal government the next. In August, he said the feds didn't like his plan. Now he says they love it. He says the federal government won't take hydro investments into account. Then he tells this House they were a useless waste. He says the NDP did nothing but wants credit for all the stuff they did. The Premier of Ontario says our Premier is getting rid of the carbon tax, which he denies, and then he actually does. My question is, which Premier should this Manitoban and Canadians be listening to? The Premier of Manitoba from one minute or the Premier of Manitoba from the next?
The Honourable First Minister.
Well, there you go, Madam Speaker. The member wants to play partisan politics like his pals down east in the Liberal government. Instead of fighting climate change, he wants to score cheap, petty political points by dividing Canadians. Preston Manning's for a carbon tax. Andrew Coyne, Dick Cheney, for heaven's sakes. What's he talking about? There are people in every political party who support the concept and people, quite frankly, in every political party who oppose it. What I oppose is a federal government that tries to impose a double increasing tax on Manitobans while giving a break to the people of Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador. And I can understand why the member opposite doesn't stand up for Manitobans,
Right.
because we are going to.